Morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Susan Jacobson, and I am the interim chair in the Department of Journalism and Media at Florida International University. I'm thrilled to be able to welcome you to our summer panel discussion on the future of journalism, featuring some of our local news celebrities from Channel 7, Channel 4, Channel 10, the Miami Herald, and both organizations, and all of our panelists have a connection to either the National Association of Black Journalists South Florida chapter or the National Association of Hispanic Journalists South Florida chapter. So we're very thrilled to have them here. We also have in the audience today, we have graduating students in our senior capstone class. And we have high school journalism students in our summer journalism jumpstart program. So today we are really lucky to be able to bring you this panel moderated by one of our star students, Christopher Gomez, who's going to introduce the panelists to you now.
Good morning, guys. It's so great to be here. Thank you, all of you guys, for coming here today. So we'd like to introduce our panel: Taylor Stewart, reporter from WSVN Channel 7, Haley Sutton, sports anchor and reporter for NBC6, all of it, even producing, Christian De La Rosa, a reporter for Local 10, and then our reporter from the Miami Herald. Thank you so much for being here. If you could all just introduce yourselves real quick, take a minute. We'll start from left to right.
That would be me. Hi, guys. Taylor Stewart again from DC, by way of Asheville, North Carolina, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Atlanta. And I just love to tell stories. I love this area, love the beach. And I'm excited to kind of give any information that I have that can be helpful.
Well, like I said, my name is Haley Sutton. I'm the weekend sports anchor reporter over at NBC6. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I got my first job ever in this business in the beautiful city of Great Falls, Montana. I then moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and covered the best college football in the country with Auburn and Alabama. And now I am here. Is that a Roll Tide or a War Eagle? War Eagle, baby. I love it. And then obviously I just moved here in January. So I'm so excited to be in Miami. It's a lot more fast paced than what I'm used to, but man, we got good sports here. So I'm excited.
Christian De La Rosa. No, I'm not from Miami. I'm from Puerto Rico. And I arrived in Miami by way of, oh God, it's a long list. Panama City Beach, Orlando, San Diego, Atlanta. And I've been in Miami for about 5 years. I cover anything and everything. And we're here to answer any of your questions and hopefully help you determine what you want to do in the future.
I'm David Ovalle. I'm with the Miami Herald. I'm originally from Southern California. I came to the Miami Herald as an intern in 2002, and they can't get rid of me. So I'm here. I've been mostly covering criminal justice, murders, mayhem, corruption scandals, all of it. That's generally what I do, although, you know, I also cover hurricanes and everything else. So yeah, whatever help I can be.
He's the smartest person in the room.
All right, so let's get started. The first question I want to ask you guys is, you all kind of touched upon it, how you guys have moved from market to market, right? You started in Panama City Beach. You always start small and end up big. So I want to ask you, Haley, what do you think is the importance of that in being a good journalist?
Well, I guess in relation to moving from place to place, obviously going from Dallas to Montana was a culture shock. That'll put it nicely, I think. But I think that was the best thing I ever did for my career, putting myself in a really uncomfortable position, and getting to do things that I never would have got to do. One of my favorite things that I ever got to cover is the rodeo. And it's so fun. It's so much fun. It's insane. It's an experience unlike any other, but I never would have got that if I would have stayed in Dallas. So I think the beauty of this industry is getting to move. I mean, the list that he just listed, so many different places, so many different cultures. I think it's so important to really immerse yourself in those communities, get to know the people, tell those stories. And I think it kind of helps you get to where you want to be in the future.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, and in thinking about the future of journalism, I used to be very rigid with the idea of starting in a small market and working your way up. And I used to be, in fact, a hater with young people that said, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to start in New York. I think that starting in a small market definitely seasons you, makes you a better rounded journalist because of the experiences that you're having, because you're meeting different people and just learning, not just being a good journalist, but learning people, learning culture, because every state, every city has kind of its own culture. And that just makes you a broader, a better thinker, a better critical thinker. However, I think that our industry has evolved and is evolving to such a place where your options are unlimited, right? I mean, you could start at a small online publication. You could start, now a lot of the networks have like their streaming services, or their, NBC has NBC Latino. There's so many opportunities out there. Don't limit yourself to, the path that I took. Everyone has their own path, but certainly starting in a smaller market has huge benefits.
It also allows you to make mistakes too, because it's better to say the wrong thing in Great Falls, Montana, than it is to say the wrong thing in Miami, Florida. So I
As
think
the
it,
Heat play.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
you say the wrong name for a player on the Heat roster as opposed
Yeah.
to the local high school team in Great Falls. So it definitely gives you that opportunity to make those mistakes. As you mentioned, seasoned, I love that, giving an opportunity to get those reps so that when you come to a market like Miami or New York or DC or whatever it is, you have the opportunity to feel confident because you've already made those mistakes.
And Taylor, I want to ask you something that I think is really important, especially right now, the future of journalism. We were kind of talking about it, that kind of fact of MMJ, right? Multimedia journalists in those small markets, how you start out without a photographer, without an editor, just on your own. Is that the future?
Yeah, because it's not even just when you start out at this point. I mean, major markets from DC to Atlanta to New York are looking for MMJs, as in you do it all. And I personally think it, the quality of the product suffers, but at the end of the day, it's what you got to do. It's this job is no longer just getting in front of camera and there we go, getting in front of camera and saying some information or, putting a package together. It is on digital. It is shooting video. It is understanding the shots that you want and how you want it to look. And so it's a thing, and I definitely did it my first couple of years as well.
Yeah, I mean,
We've all done it.
yeah, you touched on digital. So David, I want to bring you in on this. The Miami Herald, right? A lot of its readership right now is online. Do you think that's how it's going to stay?
I think that's how it's going to stay. When I first started, of course, we had the internet, but it was ancient, right? It was, we didn't have social media, we didn't have smartphones, so it wasn't really our priority. Our when I grew up, I mean, in journalism, it was, oh my God, I'm on the front page. This is amazing. I still have the first time I was on the front page. Now that doesn't really matter. I'm going to guess most of you guys did not grow up reading physical print newspapers. But I did, and so it was like a big deal for us. But I think it is, and the constraints, it's great in some ways, and it's terrible in other ways, just in terms of the product or the quality. Like right now, we have a strategy at the Miami Herald where we're, where they ask us to quote unquote swarm stories, right? So it's like they want to do like 3 or 4 separate stories on sort of like the same topic, right? So it ends up kind of being sometimes quantity over quality. And I think you're going to find that in a lot of newsrooms. And we're still just trying to figure it out because, they've changed the metrics, right? Now we have counts of how many clicks we have for the year. We have target goals. We have, did this story do well? What stories do better than others? I mean, you can go into the Miami Herald website right now and probably find some stories that you're like, why is this in the Miami Herald website? Well, because it's probably, our national desk is like, a bear trapped, knocked over a trash can in Montana. You'll never know why. And then it's,
It's very
but,
common, by
yeah,
the way.
so so we're just all like trying to figure it out. But I think at the end of the day, some of my best stories are ones that I just legitimately, it's just good reporting, right? You find a hell of a story, you report it out, and sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes weeks. And it's the same in TV. It's like, if you get a good story, it's going to do well no matter what. So some of the other stuff you just have to sort through.
It has its pros and cons with woman banding, for example. Like, in my opinion, the best TV writers are people that have woman banded for a long time. Because, you just learn so much about writing to video and not being literal when you write. And that comes from that experience. So don't be discouraged. I think you just need to be reminded that the focus with what we do isn't necessarily being on the front page or being on camera. It's about the journalism. It's about getting the truth, finding the truth and communicating.
And also just to add to that, like the television part is probably all of a minute of our day.
Yeah.
I mean,
I say that all the time.
yeah, people think you're standing in front of a camera all day. You're not. You're running around, you're hustling, you're getting interviews, you're putting your story together. And I think, you know, being able to MMJ, at least having that backing, makes you so much faster.
Mhm.
And I think the most important skill to do that is really just time management, because
Yeah.
that's a skill you cannot get around when we're pumping out more content than, you know, we've ever done before.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you. So now everything you have to do is faster, right? Versus getting assigned one story, now it's 2 or 3 in a day, right? So how do you get so fast? How does being an MMJ help you do that, Christian?
Well, let's see, I have to think back. I haven't MMJ'd in a while, but you know, to her point, I mean, it's time management. I think that if you pay attention to your writing class, you will know that with TV especially, you learn how to focus, right? Your story, that's like crucial. You know, there may be 10 important facts, relevant facts to what you're covering in your story, but in TV, you need to learn that good writing is about focused writing. So maybe in your story, you're only going to talk about 5. Yes, it has to be fair, balanced, and thorough, but learning how to focus is part of the time management. You're not only managing your logistics, you're managing how to write a concise story. And those are things that you learn with one-man banding. So if I'm out and I'm having to do 3 different stories in a day, which I would never do because that's ludicrous and crazy.
No one should do that.
But if I have to turn 3 packages in a day, then I'm going to manage, okay, this is the focus I'm going to take here, there, and there. And that comes through skills that you learn when you're out and about dealing with craziness and juggling too many things.
I will also say too, that when it, just staying on that topic of MMJing, you kind of learn how to find those focus points throughout your interviews. So for example, if I'm sitting at a press conference for the new head coach of the Florida Panthers, you're automatically, when you're listening, you're thinking, okay, you've read his bio, you know that he's been in this place, you know he's been in the business for years and years and years, you know that he's excited to come to South Florida. So you have all of those things in your head that you already know. So now when you go into the press conference, maybe it's like, well, let's dig a little bit. Maybe my first story is going to be why South Florida? Well, he talks about his son is going to the University of Miami, so it's a good fit. He talked about how his wife has always wanted to retire here in South Florida. Boom. So that's your first angle. So as you're listening to these press conferences, it becomes easier. Maybe you write down like, you know, 2 minutes in, he said this. Or if I'm recording it, what I do is if I find a soundbite that I really enjoy, I'll cover the camera. That way, as I'm going through the audio when I'm cutting, I know when I see that camera has been covered, I know that that's the soundbite that I want. So I think as you get these more reps, you kind of just train yourself to know like, okay, it's 2 p.m. I am live in R4 and I have a package that I have to live front. So in your head, you are already going through these checklists of what you need to do. You're active listening in these interviews and these press conferences that kind of help you. So that way, by the time the press conference is done, my story is already mentally written. I just have to physically write it, track it, and then slap it all together. So I think going back to that time management, that's the most important thing that you can teach yourself right now, even in day-to-day activities. If you're going to the grocery store, time manage, right? We don't wander around the grocery store. We know we need eggs, we need milk, and we need sugar. So time management. And then the rest of it, I think, just kind of comes together because you're done and then you're live at 5 and then it's over.
I just want to say that's probably the most important thing I wish I knew from day one, like time management and making sure you're always being focused while you're on assignment.
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier too, the on-air part, y'all, that's the easiest part of my day. If I'm anchoring, so I'm anchoring today and I'm in our 5 and an 11. I'm on TV for 2 minutes at 5 and maybe 2 minutes at 11. That's 4 minutes of a 8-hour workday, right? And I say 8 lovingly, right? 4 minutes What am I doing with the rest of that time?
Mhm.
I'm gathering stories. I'm on Zoom calls, talking to interviews. I'm reading. I read so much now because you have to be well versed in what you know. I'm writing scripts. I'm putting in graphics. I'm doing my hair. I'm doing my makeup. So the 4 minutes that I'm on TV is not what's important. It's everything that leads up to that 4 minutes. Because once you're there, all you're doing is reading, right? You're reading from a prompter. You know what you're talking about because you're the one that's written your script. So it's all about that preparation, what's going into that preparation, so that when you have that 4 minutes, it's cake. That's the easiest part.
And Taylor, I want to ask you, so Christian kind of talked about it, those 5 facts, right? But I think that now that you have online, that you have social media, just because you don't do it on TV, you can have those 10 online,
Yeah.
right? So how important is that in getting a full fleshed out story?
I mean, I tell you, it's definitely difficult when you are pushing out a lot of content and stories changing throughout the day, but you want to get all that information in. And so, like Chris said, I think you have to select what goes inside the package and what goes online. But at the end of the day, it's your job to tell the story fairly, truthfully, and accurately. And so, if there's a fact that changes your story, you've got to keep it in your package. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing you just learn over time.
Yeah, and David, real quick, so we've been talking a lot about MMJs, right? And how you have to be well-versed in a lot of different things, shooting, writing, editing. In print, do you think that reporters now have to have more of a knowledge on a wide base of stories? I mean, you were talking about how you cover like crime and stuff like that, but are you forced to do maybe not sports, but something else, entertainment sections, other stuff like that?
Well, yes. I've always, I mean, I actually started out as a sports writer, so here at the Herald. So that actually was one of the things that got me to be as fast as I am writing is covering sports, because the deadlines, at least back then, were so crazy because you had to hit like, 11 o'clock print deadline and the game starts like at 8 or whatever. But less so with, I would say it's similar to MMJs that you have to sort of, there's so many bells and whistles you have to put on stories now, right? So I mean, I make my own little video packages on, my phone and court a lot. I'll take photos, I'll tweet, I have to do all this sort of stuff that's not the traditional print reporter kind of responsibility, right? So there's a lot more asked of you in the digital age, which is similar to what the TV guys have to do too. So you have that, so it's not that dissimilar. In terms of, it's still a little bit different in print, because generally if you work at a newspaper or a news agency, unless you're working for like a wire service or something, you're generally going to be like either a general assignment reporter like Christian, or you're going to be covering a beat. Like for me, I cover the courthouse, I cover crime and justice and all that. So generally the people I'm talking to day in and day out, it's just detectives, prosecutors, lawyers, judges, so and yes, it always helps to have that breadth of knowledge, because if you need to cover a hurricane or cover something else, it helps. But it helps to start small in a beat, right? You cover City Hall, that's what I covered, City of North Miami. In fact, all this Biscayne Landing and all this stuff, I wrote about it when it was just in the planning stages, back when I was a community reporter, sort of like the lowest cub reporter. So it's a little bit different. In print, you have a lot of beats. You cover education, you cover City Hall, you cover whatever, which in TV, I don't think they generally do that as much.
Well, like I said he's the smartest guy in the room. No, I mean, don't be overwhelmed when you hear, I need to know about everything. Find out what's interesting to you and focus on that. I like covering, an array of topics and issues. I enjoy that and I am good at that. So that's why I focus on general assignment. But if you like the courts, or if you like immigration, or if you like entertainment, focus on that, because that's going to be your strength, and that's going to lead you to developing excellent sources and being able to pick up the phone on a Friday night because you like what you're covering.
I would say there's a lot of TV reporters you see are like, oh, another Miami Beach story. It must be Sheldon Fox, right? And
Yeah.
it is. Or certain TV reporters just sort of gravitate towards something, and the stations generally allow them to, if they're not at something breaking and they get a hot tip on something related to that area, they're like, all right, cool, run with it, right? I mean,
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about tips. Citizen journalism is bigger every day, right? Everyone has a connection on their cell phone. How does it make it harder for you guys to kind of delve out what the actual facts are? So like a perfect example that I'll give you is now Only in Date, right? They're huge and people send them video clips. And a lot of the times they have video, they have stories that stations don't have, right? So
Yeah.
how do you marry that together?
Oof, that's a
Only
tough
indeed.
question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a tough question because everybody thinks they're a reporter, or everybody thinks that just because they record themselves talking about something on YouTube or on social media, you know, that's the story. And I think, I don't know, when I sit down and watch all of these videos, not necessarily only in Date,
Yeah.
because Only in Date is about video and wow factor and really cool, but I'm talking about the YouTubers and the citizen journalists, self-proclaimed, that are out there, and that many people watch and take as news and give them credibility when in fact, you know, they're giving you a biased version of, or their opinion of, you know, what is it that they're talking about. I mean, I think it shows how important what we do is. And, you know, it's very concerning to me. All of those people out there on YouTube and people falling for their conspiracy theories and their misinformation, disinformation, and alternative facts. That's something really concerning when I think of the future.
Some technical difficulties. So David, you were talking about citizen journalism, if you wanted to.
Oh, right. So the story I was telling was a couple years ago, and I always share this story as an example of as a cautionary tale about social media and citizen journalism and relying on the gospel of social media. A couple years ago, there was a mass shooting scare at Dolphin Mall in Doral. It was a Friday night, and there was something that spooked people. It was a loud sound, or I don't know what. And there was some sort of altercation, and everyone thought it was a mass shooter. So people start going on Twitter, oh my God, there's a mass shooting at, you know, there's a mass shooting scare at Dolphin Mall. Everyone goes rushing down there, the TV stations, the cops. I mean, it becomes this huge deal. It's a Friday night, and I'm like starting to make phone calls, and I reached out to a federal source of mine who does like the SWAT team stuff. And he's like, yeah, we're on our way now. And so I see on Twitter, somebody had shared this thing that was going viral, a photo of a guy with a shotgun shooting in the air in front of like Dolphin Mall. Like you could see it was Dolphin Mall. So everyone's thinking this photo is like, oh my God, there's a guy with a shotgun going around shooting people, and it just blows up on Twitter, and then, you know, everyone's retweeting it and all this stuff, right? So I sent it to my buddy, and he's like, bro, that's 2 years old. I know that photo. That was an active shooter training we did at Dolphin Mall. We put it like on the Doral police website or something, just to show that we were doing something. Somebody took that photo and tried to make it look like it was an actual active shooter, you know, in the present day. And so I immediately went on Twitter and was like, this is fake. This is from an active, you know, shooter training from years ago. This is a police officer that's pretending, right? This was just a training thing. And then that, you know, but at the end, that got a lot of traction online, but at the end of the day, a shit ton of people saw, excuse my language, a shit ton of people thought that was happening in Dolphin Mall. And so, you know, it was like, we were talking about like half my job is just like shooting down, no pun intended, but just like debunking things on Twitter or on Facebook, you know, that end up being like completely wrong because either it gets lost in translation or people are just being jerks and they want to just stir things up.
And I want to add to that quickly. When you're a journalist, you're the reporter, right? You're the one who's come to these panels and listened to people speak. You've done the work, you've built those sources, you've done the story, right? So just because Joe Schmo on Facebook is telling you that, you know, this happened and you're wrong and you're stupid because whatever it is, you're the one who's done the work. You're the one who's confirmed that information. So don't back down. I remember early in my career, I would always get nervous when Twitter started getting really popular for sports. And I would tweet something out and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a good tweet. And immediately it's men with no profile picture on their Twitter saying, you're wrong, you're stupid. Just happened yesterday. I tweeted about the kid who's coming to UM on the $9.5 million NIL deal that's not confirmed, but You know, he's getting paid to come play at the University of Miami. I tweeted out a simple stat. If true, he's making more money than quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. That's it. I didn't say I confirmed it. I just said there's reports out. Here's what it's saying. Here's the magnitude of it. Everybody's trying to tell you you're wrong. You're stupid. You don't pay attention. But I've done the work, right? I talked to the Dolphins, right? I've built those sources. So you can tell me all day long I'm wrong, but you're wrong, right? So have that confidence. Like, especially I'm speaking to my ladies in this room, because you are going to constantly be told, because you're a woman, that you're wrong. And you're not. You've done the work. You've done more than, respectfully, more than what a lot of your male counterparts have done, right? So be confident, know that you're the reporter in those situations. And regardless of what people on Twitter, people on Facebook, you might even be live and you have people calling you fake news media. I mean, we did that, for 2 years when you're live and you got people shouting at you that you're fake, but you know you're not fake. Your employer knows you're not fake. And the people who care about journalism and know that you're putting in the work know you're not fake. So I think going off of that, it can be frustrating. Like I said, know it. You've done the work. You're the journalist. You're the reporter. So keep that with you.
Don't waste your time though. And
Yeah.
I remind myself this
Yeah.
daily, trying to argue with these people and convince them, because most of the time they have half a brain.
Or they haven't read the actual
Yeah.
story.
And I just want to tack on to what Haley's saying, is like a lot of the job is that you don't really talk about is there's going to be self-doubt. There's going to be people who are going to talk about you crazy to your face, and behind your back and online. And I remember even during 2020 where we had to have security during certain
Yeah.
times. So like, those are the real kind of, I guess, issues with the job, and you don't have a personal life. But other than that, it's generally, I would say, rewarding all around.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And Haley, you mentioned kind of the whole diversity thing of having women in news. You're part of NBC6's all women sports team. So talk about that.
Man, what a cool opportunity, right? When I started in this business, I guess almost 5 years ago, it was hard. 5 years ago, guys, it was hard to find women in the sports world. And I work for a team of 3 incredible women in sports. And not only are we incredible at what we do, I mean, we're badass. I work with Ruthie Polinsky. She's insane. I've learned so much from her already. Gisela Spinales, who has so much knowledge in this Miami market. And what a cool moment. I will never forget. My favorite thing that I've done so far is Marlins opening day and walking into the ballpark, and you've got 7 and 10, and they've got these big photogs and all this. And there's 3 women walking in doing the exact same job. I mean, goosebumps, right? And it's an incredible thing. And I think I take a lot of pride. I've always been very open and speaking up for women of color. I've struggled my whole career, even now, wearing my natural hair. This is the first time in my career where I've been able to just say, F it. I see that in the background, F it, right? And wear what it looks like. So, I mean, I think it's an incredible thing, and it's an empowering thing that every single one of you ladies sitting in here are doing this job. And it's not just with journalism, it's with everything. It's with STEM, it's with teaching, it's everything, right? We have grown and our voices are loud. I know there's a lot of shit going on right now with our government, right? But just know that, like, your voices matter. You're doing incredible stuff as women. I love that we are getting these opportunities. It's been such an insane experience. So if there's ever a time when some stinky boy tells you that you can't do what you want to do, literally give him the bird and do it better, because that's what we're good at. That is what we are good at.
Is this R-rated?
This is the straight version. We're giving it to you straight, okay?
Yeah, so Taylor, Haley kind of talked about it. Minority representation in media now, how there's more minority representation, more stories coming from the African-American community, from the Hispanic community. How do you think that makes our coverage better as journalists?
Oh, it's necessary because it's what the world looks like. I think that if you don't have stories that represent every single culture in your DMA, you bitterly disserve your community. And it's important to make sure that if you're coming into a newsroom as a person of color, as a trans LGBTQ member, as someone who has a specific group that needs representation, it's important to at least seek out people who can help tell those stories. And so I definitely say at any point in time, if you don't have stories of color on the board each day, and I say that meaning like, a story that maybe how this would impact a specific community, you've just not done your job, I think, or your due diligence as a journalist.
I do want to add, that it's still important. And this was for me also when I started, I felt like I had to be better than the non-minorities in the room. And, you know, as a young person, you shouldn't feel that way. But to this day, to all the minority journalists in the room, I definitely benefited from thinking that way. And so just make sure you don't think that just because you're applying to an organization, yes, being a minority is an asset, but know that you have to be not just good, but try to be better than everyone else that matches your experience that's in that newsroom.
I think also it's important as well, and I think it's taken us a long time to kind of get to this point, but as a person of color, you have to speak up. And I know it's not our responsibility to always teach, so to speak, but some of my best girlfriends I met in my last market in Montgomery, one of my best friends, Ashley, is white, like unapologetically white, but she is so receptive to learning about our experiences. When I explained to her that, you know, like, oh, like, well, I have to have time to straighten my hair because that's what looks good. She's like, wait, you have to wake up every morning and straighten your hair? And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of, you know, when I wear it curly, people think it's unprofessional. That's what I've been told. And so if you are a minority, right, like don't be afraid to have those conversations in your newsroom. If you see something that is making you uncomfortable, that's making you feel like you cannot be 100% yourself, say something about it, right? And on the other side of that, if you're not a minority, if you are a white person, be receptive to that. Understand that our experience in this business can be challenging. You know, like I said, like I've been in this business for 5 years, and this is the first time where I can just wake up and do my hair however I want to do it. That's a real experience that a lot of people in this room, I sure have had or will have as they move into that professional part of their life. So be understanding to that. If we come in and we're frustrated because, you know, like you really wanted to do this story about Juneteenth and your station said, no, that's not important. Right? Be vocal about that and also be receptive and understand why that type of story is so important.
So David, in print journalism, it doesn't matter how your hair looks when you're writing your story, but how do you see like Hispanic and African American representation in the Miami Herald?
Well, I mean, it does matter in the sense that, you know, because we're still going out and representing
Of
people,
course.
right? So, you know, I continue to look like a kid, even though I'm a lot older, you know what I mean? So like a lot of times people in court I get mistaken for a defendant in court all the time, you know, or people will think I'm like the intern from law school or something. So, you know, those kinds of things do matter. And sometimes you have to sort of battle those prejudices. Miami's a weird market because we're a majority Hispanic city. So I guess I'm the majority here, but within our newsroom, we don't really have as many Hispanics as you should. I mean, there's no reason why I should have to be translating interviews for my fellow reporters who don't speak Spanish, right?
100%.
But we have that a lot. We have a terrible lack of Creole speaking journalists in South Florida,
Across the board.
yeah, you know, so like, you know, there's times where, you know, I need help with like, there was this mom who killed her 2 kids a couple of months ago. And the dad spoke pretty good English, but it would have helped a lot if I could speak Creole, or if we had someone that could speak Creole that would be able to talk with the family and get more in-depth, precise information. Right. Yeah, I mean, and even within the Hispanic groups here in Miami, you know, I'm not Cuban. So sometimes there's kind of clashes between the different Hispanic groups, right? Even within the Cuban groups themselves, right? And so you have these different, if you're a newer Cuban who's arrived here, your experience is markedly different than someone whose family has been here for 4 decades, right? Or 3 decades. So having that diversity is super important within the newsroom, especially in the newspaper world, because, you know, we tend to be able to do a little bit more in-depth, nuanced stuff. You know, we don't have the constraints of a 1.5-minute TV packages. So you really have to be able to like talk to people and like, you know, get real in depth with people. And sometimes it's difficult if you're not part of that community and don't have the background.
Christian, how important is it to you that a newsroom reflects the population that it's covering?
I mean, if you want to cover your community accurately, I don't think you can if it doesn't. I mean, that's a perfect example, right? we think so much of Hispanic and Black journalists, but our community, a huge Asian community. And I think all of our stations struggle with, having a newsroom that fully reflects the community. It's a work in progress, but I think we're pretty fortunate in Miami to have the diversity that we have, because other communities, they'll be
Great
like,
Falls, Montana.
no, or they'll be like 70% Mexican and everyone in the newsroom is white,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get into this, but
Rolls
the
up
whole-
sleeves.
the whole thing with like, it happens a lot with Hispanics, and we talk about this at NHJ. Hispanics are a diverse community. And oftentimes, newsrooms have been criticized for hiring white passing Hispanics that sometimes don't even speak Spanish. So that's a whole other issue. But yeah, no, it's important. And as to your point, you as a reporter, a minority reporter, or you don't even have to be a minority. If you understand that representation matters, then you yourself should be vocal about it too in your newsroom.
All right, so now I would like to open up the floor for some questions from our students. Does anyone have a question? You can head to the podium.
Ask anything, don't be afraid.
Please.
Anything you need to
Seriously.
know.
Dating life, everything.
Okay, I'm gonna start off with questions then.
Jobs, internships.
I'll start off the questions since we have a shy group, but I'm looking at all of you to ask some good questions. But this is a good question for everybody who's sitting in this room. The students from high school who are exploring journalism as a career, the students in our capstone class led by Professor Sullivan who are about to graduate and go into the wide world. So what advice do you have for young journalists just starting out?
Right to left.
Yeah. Yeah, right to left.
Okay.
Which right?
I think the thing I always tell people is journalism really is at the heart a local, all journalism, like politics, generally tends to be local, right? So make a real effort to learn how your city works. When I first started here, I couldn't have told you the difference between North Miami Beach, city of Miami Beach. How government works and how institutions work. So you know how to cover them and you know where to look for information, right? You know how to get good stories. And the other thing is start writing at your local school newspaper, right? Because even if you're going into TV, you really need that skill of writing concise, clear stories, and most importantly, learning how to talk to people, right? So if you want to go into TV, but man, the experience of writing for the Beacon or for the Hurricane, or like I was the editor of the Daily Trojan at USC, that is super helpful because it just gets you in the flow of news gathering and how to be a journalist. And it translates so well into broadcast journalism. Some of the best broadcast TV guys and girls historically were people that came from newspapers because they had that really good experience. So that's just, read a lot, write a lot.
Christian?
Yeah, I think that if you're not working in a newsroom or doing something related to what you're going to school for right now, you're behind. So get on it, get with it, get out there. If you can't find an internship or a spot in your school newspaper, go out to where the story is. Write your own story. Use what you've learned. Open up a YouTube channel. Don't be one of those citizen journalists, but do your own thing, because this is so much about hands-on and getting that experience, and that's what's going to make you better. Also have a very frank conversation with yourself. What are the reasons you want to do this? Because if it's being on camera or getting followers, then move on to something else. Also, obviously you're not doing this for the money, right?
You're not.
Know that you're going to work really, really hard, be willing to put in the work, be willing to be poor
Very.
and put in the work, but know that you're doing it and it will pay off eventually. You just have to put in the work, and time will filter the people around you. This is survival of the fittest. Okay. So
100%.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go a little bit off the journalism beat because I think everything you guys are saying are important. But the number one lesson that I wish I would have known when I started this business is to give myself grace. There's so many times we've talked about it. There's so many times
that?
where exactly right where people tell you you're not good enough. People tell you that you can't make it in this business, that you can't do this, you can't do that. And that starts to creep in on you. And this profession, like you want to be perfect because it's kind of required, right? You're the one that people are going to for that information. And so you want to be perfect, you want to be accurate, you want to be correct, but you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make those mistakes. You're going to say something dumb on air. You're going to get the information wrong. You're going to freeze in a live shot, or when you're anchoring, there's going to be technical difficulties where the TriCaster goes out and you're sitting and you're like, what do we do? Right? In those moments, you have to give yourself grace. It's like I always say with athletes, the reason why I got into sports journalism is because I wanted to remind people that athletes are people first. LeBron James is a person. He brushes his teeth, he eats his food, he tucks his kids in at night when he can, because he's a person first, right? So it's the same with us. Like you're going to do stories that are hard, right? You're going to do stories where the mom drowns their kids and you have to be the one to talk about that. You're going to do sad, heavy, crazy stories that are going to impact you. So remind yourself that you're a person first, and that while this is a job, this is a passion, it's just that, right? It's work. You have to be able to, at the end of the day, give yourself some grace, say, I effed that up big time. I'm not going to do it again tomorrow.
And that's another reason why generally you want to start in a small market where you can go to a Panama City Beach market 154 and make your mistakes there. Don't be trying to get an internship at CBS 4 and think that 2 or 3 years down the line, you can get an on-air job, which has happened. But if you make a mistake, everybody's going to know and see that. And that's going to mark your career versus if you freeze in a live shot like I did in Panama City Beach, I think it was my second live shot. No one knows, no one cares, there's no record.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
I'm just going to add just 3 brief pieces of advice. Get a mentor.
Yeah.
You do not need to reinvent the wheel here. Someone has done this before you, and they can tell you what they did wrong, and what you probably will do wrong. Get a mentor immediately. Number 2, I'm just going to add on to what Haley said. When you have a mistake, go write it down and just try to figure out what happened here, so you don't, end up repeating those mistakes. And last but most important to me, take care of yourself.
Yes.
Take care of your mental health.
It's so important.
Take your day off if you need it. Don't let them make you feel like you need to work 20, extra hours in the week. This is your life. And so while it's your career, you have to be priority, because you can't do your job well unless you show up for it. And to do so, you got to take care of you. So whatever that looks like.
All right, we're going to take another question.
Thank you, Chris. Great panel. My name is Tim Sullivan. I'm teaching the journalism capstone this summer with several graduating seniors within this room. I'll be quick. My reporter instincts kicked in a lot during this, so I took a lot of notes. I apologize, but there's a line behind me, so I'll be quick. I wanted to, I think it's very, very important for the students in particular that I'm teaching, and I want to start with David, but also move over to Haley and the panel as well. We're essentially covering beats this summer. We're sort of starting with one tree and learning tentacles off of it. We're doing it at a pretty good rate, 6 weeks and we're out. In many instances, we're covering what we want. Haley just mentioned talking about stories that are hard, maybe not having to all the time to be able to soak up something that we're experts in. This class has a lot of strengths in what they are covering, but that may not be the case in 2 years. Can you share some advice to them about learning things on the fly, so to speak, and having to be thrown, quote unquote, into the fire, where you sort of have to become an expert in a hurry, maybe for a 15-inch story or for a 2-minute package by the end of the night, where you don't necessarily have all that background. Yes, we have so much multimedia to research, but we also don't want to seem like we just did all that research on the way. How do we sort of marry those two sort of divisions, if you will, if that makes sense?
No, it does.
No, well, that's one of the things I like about my job, is that because there's so many different weird topics that you can delve into through the courts, whether it's a weird trademark dispute or, some unique stand your ground claim that's going on in criminal court. I think the thing for me that's helped me a lot, And some of it is just requires a little bit of patience and following up on stories. So let's just say you have to do a breaking news story on some specific thing, but you're like, and you do it and you get it done and it's passable. But, reach out to those people, whether it's a detective, whether it's a lawyer or prosecutor in whatever specific area, and ask to pick their brain, and people love to talk about themselves. Okay. And especially people that generally might not get the attention, right? So if I'm going to, some economic crimes detective or something, I'll be like, hey, let me, let's go have coffee. Let me pick your brain a little bit, because I generally want to soak up all the different knowledge that they have. And it helps inform me for future stories and for future things that I might do. And you build good sources that way. And to me, longevity is a little bit of a long game, right? Because we all want to we all want to go on to, be the next big bad reporter in New York or something. But, being around long enough where people know you, they recognize you, they trust you, right? They'll reach out to you. That counts for something. So also, just be willing to talk to people and look, I'm not doing a story, but I just want to learn about arson investigations or, whatever. Give me the background on this or that. That's the one thing. It's just try to get away from the computer and the phone and actually meet up with people in real life.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No.
Unlike David, we don't have a lot of time sometimes. So we are learning on the way in the car. And so, yeah, that happens. And I just would say keep up with the coverage at your station if you guys have been covering a certain story. And I think when you're, pitching stories every day, own your stories, know that they're good, know that your pitch is going to turn, know that you're going to have your sources together. So you already kind of know the information because you've vetted everything, when you have that time. But
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I hate looking dumb. I know this is so hard to imagine, but I'm incredibly shy a lot of times. And I get embarrassed, or really early on in my career, I would get embarrassed because I didn't want to say anything that I didn't want to say or look dumb. Right. But now I've kind of built that confidence of owning the room. And when it comes to, if you're having to learn a story on the fly, I'm like, how much information can I learn as quickly as possible? And like I said, your brain you just start developing okay, here's the important part of this piece. Here's that. But to David's point, I think the most important thing you can do is talk to people, because I can read a press release all day long about who the new head coach for the Dolphins is, Mike McDaniel. I can read about him all day long, but until you get to know him, he's a guy that cares about his Yeezy collection. He's a guy that wears long sleeve shirts at football practice because he wants to feel what his football players are going through during two-a-days, right? Those are the kind of pieces that you're only going to get if you are speaking to him or you're observing him doing that. So it's not all about reading. Like David said, I think that's a really important nugget.
But definitely get in the habit of reading the paper and knowing what's going on in your community. That way you are coming into work with depth as to what's going on around you. And if you're on your way to the story and you just don't know anything about the topic, certainly read up as much as you can on the way, but focus on listening to the person that you're interviewing, because especially if you're doing that for TV, that's your story. What is that person telling you about where you're at? Draw me a picture of what you're seeing and what's happening. And you can always depend on that.
All right, so our next question, if you could tell us your name.
My name is Celeste Canberra. I'm a senior at Cypress Bay High School doing the high school program here. I'm starting out as a kind of a journalist, of course, not a professional one, but as a editor-in-chief at my school newspaper. And I wanted to ask, always been very curious on how do you start? I know that you said you start small, going to small communities, but how do you start from a high school perspective? From how do you get credibility from such a younger age? How do people take you seriously? You know what I mean?
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm already impressed by you, right? You're a high school senior and you are the editor-in-chief. So I don't know anything about these other people in the room, but the fact that you just told me, someone who's been working in this business for 5 years, that you're already started. I didn't get into this business until I was working on a master's degree in college. So you already had me beat by a mile. So see ya, at the New York Times in a couple of years, but that's where it starts, right? We talked about it earlier, just getting involved in any way possible. I had a friend who was trying to get into this job, just like, Haley, how do I get into this business? I don't have any experience. And I told her, I said, you have a phone, right? Go cover something. So for me, I always default to sports because it's one of the only things that I really know well. But I was like, go to a high school basketball game, get your phone out, shoot some highlights, have someone shoot a stand up for you. She did that. Now she works at Bleacher Report. So it's all about utilizing the resources that you have around you, and the fact that you already know that this is kind of what you want to do. That I think that's the hardest part for me, was I didn't know what I wanted to do. I failed out of art school. I tried doing athletic training. I graduated with a BS kinesiology degree that I never use. And so like the fact that you already have that, and not only do you have that, but you're an editor in chief, that's dope.
Yeah.
Right. So tell people that, hi, I'm the editor in chief of my newspaper. And that immediately impresses
Well,
people.
you ask us, how do you start? You've already started.
Yeah.
Like, cause I know how I want to start and I know I want to go to college, but what I think more scared or concerned about is after college. Like, cause what you do with a degree, like, what do you do with that? Like, how do you
Yes.
start talking to
Don't-
people?
No, go ahead.
Oh, real quick. So what I wanted to tell you is my first job, I already work in the business now, was at Channel 7 with Taylor as a writer. That is the first job that I think in this market you can start with. Just coming out of college, you become a writer at Channel 7, and then you can grow from there, right? All the other stations don't have positions that are so easily accessible like that one. And I think that that's the first place where you start. At least it was for me, and it's worked out for me so far.
And I also just want to add, please do not think about what
I
happens
know,
after
girl.
college. I can't really tell you what happens after the next 3 weeks. Life does not work out that way. Go to college, feel it out, meet people, talk to folks. But it's really hard to choreograph, I think,
Yeah.
how it's going to work out. Just be prepared,
Be present.
be present,
You're already starting,
talk to people,
girl.
Thank you.
find a mentor.
Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Valerie Questel. I'm a rising junior at Pine Charter High School. I'm the news editor for the Chat newspaper. Thank you so much for being here for us.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start off with, throughout my life, I thought being hardworking and social would get me places. However, I soon realized that having and developing connections is the only key to anything in this world. So my question is, how essential are developed connections to your journalism career?
Oh my God. It's like most of the jobs, maybe all of the jobs that I've had, I've gotten because I knew somebody that knew somebody. I was good too. I worked hard, but that's what's gonna help you stand out. So I don't know what your background is, but if you can join NABJ, NHJ, do it now, because that's going to get you this wonderful, beautiful, incredible network of people. You're going to be able to find people that are exactly where you're at. And guess what? 10 years from now, if you're all still doing this, you're going to be in a place much further down because you've helped each other and you've almost helped mentor each other or support each other. So yeah.
I think also though, like that hard work and that being social and building that's also important, right? Like you could know, like Laura Oakman is one of my mentors. She's the third longest tenured sideline reporter in all of TV. And she's one of my mentors, right? So it's obviously really great to have someone like that in your corner. But if I was awful, right? If I didn't want to work hard, if I didn't want to stay and work overtime, if I didn't try to be a little bit more open and speak to people, not only does that make her look bad, but that does me no favors, because then they're going to go to Laura and they're going to say, hey, we really like Haley's reel. Could you tell us a little bit more about her? And Laura's going to go, well, yeah, I helped her get this job, but she sucked ever since, so I wouldn't hire her. Do you know what I mean? So yes, those connections are important because that's how you get your foot in the door, but you keep your feet in the door by being that hardworking, being that social person.
And can I just add last thing? We keep talking about making connections. Where would you do that, right? Like meet people. Okay, internships. What you need to know is it is in the classroom. I'm studying psychology and neuroscience. So for me, it was not in the classroom. But the best experience you're going to get is not going to be necessarily in the classroom. It's going to be in the field. It's going to be, following someone on a day-to-day, shadowing. I mean, so just get out there and try to get some real life experience.
The only reason I'm at the Miami Herald is because I was a student journalist with NHJ, and I went to their conference in 2000, I think. And my editor for the student project was a Miami Herald reporter, and she loved my work, and she sort of helped basically put in a good word for me, and I'm still here. So those professional organizations really do matter. Of course the hard work matters and all of that. I mean, I wouldn't have done anything if I didn't, work very hard, but kind of like networking. And it's difficult because, we're all shy at that age. I mean, I was like really shy in high school, but sort of doing that really does count for a lot, particularly in media.
Use the resources you have at your school, here at FIU. I changed majors and moved from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Gainesville to go to UF, and changed majors from labor law to broadcast journalism. And I got a job reading sports news at the radio station. Then I got another job as a writer at another radio station. Then I volunteered to work at WUFT in the afternoons while taking my classes, while doing a bunch of other things. Use every single opportunity that is offered for you, and then also get the internship.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Morris. I'm a senior here at FIU and one of the writing coaches with the high schoolers. So my question for you all talked a lot. So thank you. It's really great. So my question for you all is, it's a little bit mixed. So I want to know if you ever had to pivot in your career, which I'm sure you have, and how did you all find like your footing in your niche? And would you say you're in your niche? Because I'm a senior, I'm graduating in the fall. And I think, a lot of seniors that I've spoken to, and even like some of the high schoolers are nervous about this, but just like kind of like that after graduation, life of like, okay, I mean, I kind of like this, but I kind of don't like that. And I guess I can do the news, but I kind of want to do, so like, where did you find your niche and how do you pivot in that instance?
I think you have to, first of all, just go with the opportunities that are presented to you. You want to be on air, but you can't get an on-air job, but you can find a producer job. Take that producer job, or vice versa. You want to do sports, but you can only find a job in news. Take it, especially when you're out of college, because you just need to get your hands on it and start getting that experience.
I had a different experience, so I'm going to go opposite. I've been an athlete my whole life, so I kind of knew that I wanted to do something in sports. And I think the best thing I ever did for my career is be patient and wait for that sports opportunity. I would have been miserable doing news. I see what these guys do every day. I hate it, right? I don't want to talk about COVID. I don't want to talk about homicides. I want to talk about Jimmy Butler dropping 40 in the postseason 4 games in a row. That's what I want to talk about. And so for me, I waited. I had so many opportunities where I could have stayed in Texas. I could have stayed comfortable. I could have been close to my family. They weren't what I wanted to do. So I think just from my experience, if you have a passion, if politics is your passion, if you love the courtroom, whatever it is, entertainment, if that's your beat, I think you can kind of afford to, especially with the way our industry is changing, to hold out for that position that's going to help you get better. Sure, I could have taken a producer job. I could have taken a reporter job, but I don't think I would have been in this seat had I done that, right? So if you're, I don't know what you're interested in, but dabble in that, right? Look at like, okay, well, like, here's what I did in college and this is what I really enjoy doing. So maybe I'm Googling jobs or speaking to people within this industry, and you're kind of getting a feel for that. Because like I said, like that's kind of how I've found my success is big sports girl. Don't talk to me about politics. Yeah. Don't talk to me about any of that stuff. But if you want to talk about Inter Miami, if you want to talk about the Heat, I'm your gal.
So sorry, just really quickly. So then I guess the follow-up question to that would be, so then what do you do in the meantime of like that wait to like what he was saying of like, you take the opportunities, but then so what do you do in the meantime of just waiting if you've graduated? You see what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And maybe you don't get that internship right away.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me also, I was realistic, I wasn't going to sit around and wait like 2 years for a sports job to open. Right. But I was confident in knowing that I had done the work, right? We just talked about putting in that work, putting in that extra time. I was confident that I'd done that already, that I'd laid the foundation. That's why it's so important for you guys to be doing that extra work right now, because I'm not going to lie, like jobs sucked last year. Like I can't imagine being in a position where I was looking for a job last year or even the year before, because COVID was hard. Right. But if you are doing that work, if you're laying the foundation, I think it sets you, at least in my experience, it is set me up so much more for success. Because when I was in college getting my master's degree, I worked 3 different jobs. I did newspaper, I did ESPN radio, I did Fox Sports Southwest for TV. Like I did all of those things to find that niche as you spoke. I put in the work, I made those relationships with people. And as a result, it was challenging. I'm not going to say that I applied to a bunch of jobs and sitting and waiting for 3 months to figure out what I was going to do. It wasn't easy. I cried a lot. I spent a lot of time at home, but it pays off. I think in any industry you get into, there's going to be that challenging of like, oh, what am I going to do? But let go and let God. That's really a big part of my life. And like I said, I was confident in myself. I'd laid that foundation.
All right, let's get to our next question.
Hi, my name is Rachel Costa, a senior here at FIU studying journalism. So my question is, for those of you that did graduate with a journalism degree, what was something that you learned during college that prepared you for your first job? Like, what is something that you would advise us as we're still studying to really do before we leave college?
Get in a newsroom.
How to shoot a camera,
Yeah.
how to write a script, the art of brevity. Those are three
I
things
think
learned.
I think we touched on it is the internships are really important, even if they're like, with companies that maybe, aren't super well known. Like my first internship in high school was at this little magazine called Latinos Magazine. It went defunct after like a year, but it gave me some good clips I could show for, my next internship, which was at Univision in Los Angeles on the assignment desk. Then I went to the Daily Breeze, which most of you guys have never heard of, is a small newspaper in Los Angeles. And then the Oregonian, and then you kind of like build up. So, even if it's, as long as it's, in journalism, it could be TV, it could be, but you just want to get your foot in the door. That's my advice is just, or with the school newspaper, like just try to get that extracurricular activities going.
But if you're that cool kid who gets the internship and gets to go out with the coolest reporter, but if you don't know how to write a VOSAT or a package, what the hell are you doing? Like, you got to know your basics. I remember the first time I sat down in a radio shift, it probably took me 45 minutes to write a VOSAT.
Right.
I was just there in front of the screen. Get good at those things that you are practicing at school and couple that with the opportunities and the internships.
And I want to say too, now you have 4 working professionals who do this, right? And we do this, I think, because we love giving back. I love getting to speak with you guys and share my experience so that y'all don't have to go through some of the hardships that maybe I had to go to, right? So now you have 4 resources right here. When you have a question, find us on social media. I'll give you my phone number. Don't be weird, but like, we're here to be resourceful for you. So while getting internships is important, like, you're building those connections right now that the people outside or the people who chose not to come to class today aren't getting.
Thank you. And our last question.
Hello, my name is Anthony Cruz. I'm the managing editor of my school newspaper at John A. Ferguson Senior High School. I'm a rising senior. And my question for someone like David, for example, who covers the courthouse and has covered murder stories, how do you remain composed? Or for the TV people that have, like you said, taken on 3 packages in a day, how do you remain composed and how do you remain objective in a story throughout the whole process?
Cry in the car. Huh? No, I'm joking. Go ahead, go for it.
Well, for me, part of it is you just build up, you get desensitized a bit. So your first couple years will probably be challenging, right? Especially if it's not something you've ever worked in. Like one of my first stories was like I did an obit or something on some state rep's dad, and I remember telling my editor, like, this is so sad, and it's a sad story, but it was just an obit, at the end of the day. And since then, Christian can attest to this, that, we've all covered Pulse and Parkland and all these crazy tragedies and just the day-to-day tragedies. You kind of build up calluses over time. I've been accused of being a little bit of a robot. But you almost have to just learn to, like, in the beginning, I would get like really like, oh, it's terrible things with children, especially. Part of it is just experience, man. You kind of learn to, like, when I go home, that's it. I'm just at home with my family. I'm not, agonizing about the terrible tragedy. And doesn't mean you don't have empathy, because I have next to kin who call me all the time, and they're very grateful for the work that I do and that I was able to tell their loved one's story. So I try to channel it that way. Like, I feel like it may be difficult to absorb all of that, but if you spit it back out on paper and kind of, do some justice by the person that you're writing about, it kind of helps in dealing with it. It's almost like your own way of coping with it. So I always just try to find the humanity. Even people who did terrible things sometimes have human silver linings. And so you try to look for those things.
Even criminals do things for a reason. May not be the right reason, but it's their reason. And if you remind yourself as you're going into a story that you are providing a service, you are doing a job, your job is to get their side of the story. They could have gone out and killed 20 babies. Your job is to get that murderer's side of the story, if you're able to get to him or her. Just remind yourself of that. I'm here to provide a service. I'm here to do a job. I'm not going to not be a human, because that will help you tell your story. You want to project the emotion of the story that you are covering. But I think if you remind yourself that what you're doing is a job, that will help you.
And I think just kind of going off of that too, that second part that you said was, I think, incredibly important. What I talked about earlier, being a human. One of the hardest stories I've ever had to tell, local football player in Montana, great kid, straight A students, did so much community service work, was an incredible guy. And he died tragically in a cliff diving accident. And my news director came to me and she said, I want you to do this story. And like I've said over and over again, I get into sports because I don't like being sad. I don't like telling those hard stories. So I told her, I said, I don't want to do it. And she said, no, like, you need to do it. I sat down with the mom and dad the first time meeting them, and we did nothing. I just let them sit in the office and cry. And they talked about how special their son was. And I didn't write anything down. I just let them talk, and I cried with them, because I don't have any kids, but I couldn't imagine losing a child in such a tragic way. We met the second time. They were ready to talk. They were ready to be on camera. And because I'd had that emotional first meeting with them, is one of the best stories I've ever told, because I was able to relate with them. I was able to build that relationship with them. So I think, like, day to day, it's hard to get that, because, I'm not going to get 2 sessions if, like, we have to be live and this happened at, hours ago. But if you do have that opportunity, just sit down, make these people feel like their story matters, make them feel like as a person they matter, because we have a very heavy responsibility. Like, I am the one telling everyone about this kid who died, right? And you want to be able to tell that story the right way. And so I hope that answers your question, but just being empathetic.
She doesn't like being sad, but she covers the Marlins.
I barely cover the Marlins. I cover the Marlins because it's part of my job. I am also a Dallas Cowboys fan, so I'm used to being sad in sports.
There's certain questions that when you get to do this long enough, certain questions that you ask people that you kind of rely on. And one of the things that I always ask when I'm interviewing next to kin is, I'm really sorry to have to bother you, and I know it's a very challenging time, but we want to tell your so-and-so story, do you mind telling me a little bit about what made so-and-so special, right? That's just like the special thing, because I've always stunned at how in the moments of real trauma and just and this terrible thing that's happening to someone, and people just want to talk, and they want to talk about their loved one. Not always, but a lot of times they want to gush about their so-and-so, and it's a way of helping them grieve and cope as well. And so oftentimes I've found as a journalist, you end up being almost like a neutral arbiter, not an arbiter, but neutral ear to listen to, and people appreciate that. I have a little bit of an advantage where I generally don't have a camera sticking in someone's face.
It's not a little advantage.
Yes, that can be a little bit more challenging for the TV guys. But a lot of times the families, they want their loved ones' stories to be told. So you just have to like my very first time I interviewed next to kin was my first day on the job. Family of a ballerina who had been murdered by her husband, and then he killed himself. And I was like terrified. I didn't know how to ask anything. I'm just like, how do you feel about that? It's like, but they were very gracious, and you sort of just learn over time how to deal with people who have been victimized. So just experience.
Alrighty, so that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to David, Christian, Haley, Taylor, the NABJ and the NAHJ, and the Department of Journalism and Media at FIU. Christopher Gomez, thanks so much. Have a great day. That is it.